It's live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125. Tonight on our show, presidential elections in Senegal. In February this year, the country's parliament voted in dramatic process. Delay the process until the 15th of December this year. Meanwhile, fears are developing that this could spark tension in the West African country if Macky Sall, the incumbent president, decides to stay in office beyond the term which expires this year. We'll get to that for you in a moment. And slow global economic growth is impacting demand for Africa's exports. But there's a push tonight for the African Continental Free Trade Area, which could spur growth across the African continent.
But if Africa can do that, genuinely, we will see a revitalization, a renaissance of Africa.
On Connect Africa, but first we have news around the continent. Stay with us.
4 suspects have been arraigned in Kenya's capital Nairobi over a gas explosion that killed 6 people and injured about 300. A truck carrying gas cylinders blew up just before midnight in a densely populated area of the city last Thursday. The main suspect, Derek Kimathi, who is the tenant of the property where the blast happened, surrendered to the police on Monday. He appeared at the Milmani Law Courts along with 3 officials of Kenya's National Environment Management Authority. According to Kenya's NTV channel, they are yet to be charged, but authorities are considering bringing several charges against them, including murder, abuse of office, and negligence resulting in harm. A cult leader in Kenya has been charged with murder after the remains of over 400 bodies were found in shallow graves in a remote forest in the east of the country. Survivors and victims' families say Paul Mackenzie encouraged his followers to fast in order to go see Jesus. He and 29 others pleaded not guilty in a court in the coastal town of Malindi. Mackenzie has already been charged with committing acts of terror, child cruelty and torture, which he has denied. Police and prosecutors have alleged that apart from starvation, some victims may have been strangled, suffocated or beaten to death using blunt objects. The 30 accused have been charged with murdering 191 people. A Nigerian pastor has been arrested over allegations he falsely got people to part with money. Theo Ebonyi, who operates in the Benue state, is accused of swindling his followers and others out of over $930,000. Mr. Ebonyi, according to Nigeria's Anti-Corruption Authority, has denied the allegation, claiming it was fake information spread by bloggers. Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission alleged Mr. Ebonyi asked his victims to pay $1,300 each to access a $20 billion grant from the US-based Ford Foundation, though the foundation did not offer such a grant.
And those are some of the stories making the rounds across the African continent. But tonight, presidential elections in Senegal will no longer be held in February this year. That's because the country's parliament has voted to delay the process until December 15. Attempts by the opposition lawmakers to halt the process failed yesterday after they were forcefully removed from the chambers of parliament as they debated President Macky Sall's earlier decision to delay the crucial elections. For now, security is on high alert in Dakar as fears grow that any attempt by the incumbent President Macky Sall to extend his tenure, which is due to end in April this year, will spark tension in Senegal. So what's the current situation in Senegal today? It's a good time to bring in Senegalese journalist Abdul Bari, who's joining us now from the country. And of course, Bari, we know that you've been monitoring the situation for us. Tell us about the latest after this very crucial vote that is now giving legitimacy to Macky Sall's proposed deferment of the presidential elections.
Statement from ECOWAS that issued just a statement in which the Commission of the Economic Community of West African States follows with concern the unfolding situation in Senegal. It advises against any action or statement that may contravene the provision of the country constitution and reminds the population and the political class of their responsibility to maintain peace and stability in the country. Meanwhile, the ECOWAS says the Commission encourages the political class to take steps urgently to restore the electoral calendar in accordance with the provision of Senegal's constitution. This is the latest one, but unfortunately it's too late for many observers here. Yesterday, the authors of the proposed law on the postponement of the presidential election, was passed at the National Assembly, despite, the opposition of, the lawmakers from the opposition. Ultimately, dozens of gendarmes were called to rescue by the President of the National Assembly to pass the much malign text. So the postponement was finally voted on, and the presidential election now was postponed, was delayed to December 15, next December 15, while it was scheduled on February 25th. So the election is delayed for 10 months, and Macky Sall is extending his term, in power almost 1 year. This is seen here for observers as a setback for Senegal. That is known for its traditional democracy. Senegal is known for its democracy, but for many, what's happened here is really is undemocratic, and it does not have any constitutional accordance. So the Senegal Assembly have passed an amendment to the law to postpone the election, as I was mentioning. So the opposition were pushed out of the parliament by security personnel. So you can imagine. So regrettably, a significant setback for many, that has occurred in Africa's democratic progress, posing a critical challenge to Senegal's democratic values.
That's Abdul Bari joining us from Senegal on this. But I want to bring in now Adama Gaye, a Senegalese author and political analyst who's joining the conversation tonight. Adama, it's good to see you this year. Happy New Year. And of course, not a good time for your country, you say, knowing that, of course, many were expecting that the democratic transition would have been smooth. The Economic Community of West African States, alarmed by, the decline and, regress in democracy, was hoping that Senegal would make a case for democracy in the West Africa sub-region. But that's not appearing to be the case. What's your impression of what's happening in your own country now?
What is happening is something that was clearly coming up. Everybody who was genuinely interested in trying to grasp what was going on in the political spectrum in Senegal would have seen this happening. Even before he was elected in 2012, I had written that Macky Sall and Abdoulaye Wade were the two faces of the same coin, the plague and the cholera. And I said I didn't vote. I would not vote for any of them. I knew that Macky Sall was an autocrat, that he was there to steal the resources of the country financially and to destroy the fabric of the democratic society of Senegal. That's what we are witnessing.
But now, an autocrat, you describe him, but he now has backing from the lawmaking chamber, the Parliament of Senegal. They are now backing his decision, isn't it?
But the law-making body, the legislature, is something that is really a platform that is following what exactly Mr. Macky Sall wants it to do. But what is worse, that we saw, everybody saw yesterday, we saw the gendarme entering into the parliament and forcibly taking out of it members of the opposition, not allowing them not to vote, nor to express their opinion, to follow due process. So this is a very serious setback on the Senegalese democracy. For years, I've been following Senegalese democratic elections since mainly 1978, when the country returned to multi-party democracy. And it was clear that we had accepted the rules of democracy, and we had obtained democratic transition, peaceful elections, all those things. But when Macky Sall came, he progressively, one by one, worked towards killing the semblance of democracy in the country. He arrested over 1,000 people. He changed the constitution already in 2016. And now, for the first time in the history of Senegal, he postponed an election in a bid to revert his previous decision made on July 3rd not to run for a third term. That is not even allowed by the constitution, but when he said it, everybody was relieved. Now he is backtracking from that commitment.
I see.
Clearly, he's going to run for the next time in December 2024.
Well, at least on paper, he's told us that he's not interested in running for office. Do you see this as a ruse, the fact that he could be back in the race in December, the date now scheduled for the new elections?
This is a ruse. This is a joke. He's a circus. He's a clown at the helm of the country. The reality is Mr. Macky Sall has done so much damage economically, in human rights, in the management of our natural and financial resources, that he's afraid of leaving power. He knows that the very moment he quits power, he will be taken to court and jailed, because he knows what he did to Senegal. The reality is, however, that unfortunately, the ECOWAS that is so eager, and the African Union for that matter, and the European Union also, and the United Nations, so eager to condemn military coup, they are seemingly looking as if what happened in Senegal yesterday, since Saturday when Macky Sall made his statement, was not amounting to a civilian coup. It is a coup, and it should be condemned. So if tomorrow there is a military coup, I hope the ECOWAS or any other instances will not come and say we should condemn or blacklist Senegal.
At least to be fair to ECOWAS has issued a statement indicating that it is seized with the political situation in Senegal, and points out that they remain committed to enforcing, that agreement with President Macky Sall that he will not run for this year's election. You've worked with the institution that we're talking about now, the Economic Community for West African States, ECOWAS. Do you feel that the influence is waning on this political situation in Senegal?
Completely. Macky Sall did not even implement the rules of ECOWAS. When the Court of Justice of ECOWAS said that Macky Sall should not implement the electoral sponsoring of candidates, Macky Sall didn't implement that. Also, there is a rule of ECOWAS saying that you cannot change the rule of the game 6 months before an election. We are barely 20 days before the election of 25th February. Macky Sall has changed everything. He did not respect them, and he will continue his own way. The problem is so serious. I'm telling you, people have been arrested, thousands. People have been killed, scores. The democratic fabric is being totally destroyed. The country I fled personally to be an exile abroad is no longer the Senegal I've known for many years, where freedom of expression was flourishing, where democratic liberties were accepted, where transition were allowed. Mr. Macky Sall's knee is on the neck of the Senegalese democracy, and today we can say that there is a democratic night over Senegal, reminiscence of what Winston Churchill said in 1946 in Fulton, when he saw Stalin imposing an iron curtain over Central Europe, and he said an iron curtain has drawn over Central Europe. We see today in Senegal really a night of democracy overcoming Senegal today.
Okay.
And seriously, we are in a very bad situation. I expect ECOWAS and African Union and foreign partners of Senegal to speak out loud and stop Macky Sall before it is late. Otherwise, don't be surprised to see a military coup expressing a follow-up to the civilian coup we have seen since February 3rd.
And that will be another huge blow to the West African community. There are lots of people who are looking up to West African leaders now to intervene, including President Nana Addo Dankwa-Akufo-Addo, who served at some point as the chairperson of ECOWAS. Now we have the Nigerian President Tinubu chairing that arrangement. What's your expectation from these leaders in terms of perhaps imploring Macky Sall to hold the elections now?
They should not be deploring, they should be condemning and calling for sanctions. This is very important. I'm running a digital school of governance and leadership in Senegal. And under that school, last week, Friday, we invited Larry Diamond of University of Stanford, one of the most brilliant subjects about the topic of democracy. And Larry said clearly, Senegal has become an illiberal state. And if Macky Sall cancels the elections, he should be sacked. He should be punished by the international community. That's what I believe. And that's what the African countries should do. If they don't do it, they will continue seeing the advent of military regime developing across the continent. Because this time around, it will be from Dakar to Bamako, to Burkina Faso, to Niger, to Chad, to Sudan, all over, from Dakar to the Indian Ocean, you will see military regime coming back and taking over everything that we fought to make sure that democracy, multi-party freedoms would be rule of the game in our nations. So Mr. Macky Sall is a serious problem. For years, I've said this. I wrote a book about it, and we know about it. He has been arresting, killing people, military, and really using squad to kill people. Militias.
These are
condemning it, and this is because they allowed him to do this, that make him bold to continue his way of acting.
These are your claims. For now, Macky Sall is not standing trial for murder, so we need to keep that on the record. But moving forward, why Senegal, and why should Senegal matter to, first of all, the West Africa sub-region and the entire African continent? What's so unique about the Senegalese story that Africa has to be worried about?
Because Senegal was the exception. For long, Senegal was seen as the model to emulate when it comes to democracy, rule of law, freedom of expression, our hospitality, what we call teranga. That's why we call our soccer players the Lions of Teranga. So all those things made Senegal a symbol in the midst of an Africa where military coups and bad governance were prevailing. Since the 1960s, 1970s, Senegal for long has been out of that. Senegal is mainly, with Cape Verde maybe, the sole West African country that has never had a military coup. But now the conditions are right for Senegal to be out of the stature, the fabric that we made really our strength, that made our strengths, are gone today. Senegal is now lagging behind. It's no longer a democratic nation. It's a dangerous and a rogue state under the knees of Mr. Macky Sall.
What message do you have for the Senegalese people? At least some are calling for patience. It's not as though the elections will not be held. December 15 will still, of course, be this year. And the belief is that through the ballots, the Senegalese people could express their own opinion on what they think about governance going forward. Why not wait till then? And what message do you have for your people?
That is a very, very, very bad approach to the Senegalese situation. Because if you see a criminal acting that way, and you don't retaliate, you don't fight back, you don't show him strength and refusal of his action, he will continue and he will do far worse. Macky Sall is not ready to stop. He wants to run for another term. His mentors are those authoritarian leaders we see in the world, the likes of Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Recep Tayyip or Erdogan, etc. Macky Sall should be stopped and stopped now. If you allow him to go to December, what is going to happen? First, he will run, or he will try to force somebody else over the population of Senegal. He will definitely rig the election, and he will use those forces, security forces, that are now ready to do anything he wants, and they will go after the Senegalese people, and they will subdue the Senegalese people and force autocracy to prevail in Senegal. So you should not give him a chance. You should stop him, and stop him now. The same way autocrats around the world, from Milosevic to Saddam Hussein, have been arrested, or the Idi Amin Daras, Jean-Bédel Bokassa. The world needs to know who is Macky Sall and stop him right now, right away, right here. It's not a question of playing gentleman here. It is about truly looking at the issue at stake. Not just Senegal, it's a test about democracy, not only for Senegal, but for Africa, but actually for the rest of the world. Don't forget that this year, 2024, there would be 70 elections across the world, and there would be 2 billion people around the world voting. The Senegal election was the first among a series of other elections. It has set a very bad example. If you allow it to continue and survive, other criminals like Mr. Macky Sall will follow his foot and do the same. So we have to stop it and make sure that the democratic process is given a chance to thrive again.
Adama Gaye, thank you for spending some time with us out of your busy schedule. We'll reconnect again on this subject matter. Adama Gaye, Senegalese author and also political analyst, joining us on the Senegalese situation. But we know that slow global economic growth is impacting demand for Africa's exports. According to the African Development Bank, the trend is projected to persist for much longer than previously anticipated. A key framework, however, to be a solution to Africa's economic challenge is the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is seeking to create a ready market of about 1.3 billion people. So how can Africa use this free trade area to spur growth across the continent? Well, I caught up with the Director General of the Institute of Exports and International Trade of the United Kingdom, Marco Fugini, who is optimistic about the transformative nature of this framework.
No, I think we have to be realistic, so we need to understand that there are challenges and difficulties in trying to get the 50 nations of Africa to collaborate when they are so very different, from north to south, east to west, centre. The nations are very, very different heritages, but the ambition that's been enunciated, and the fact that so much actually has been achieved in such a short time, I think is to be applauded. Is there more to do? Yes. Are there great challenges? Yes. But just because things are difficult doesn't mean that they shouldn't be done. You look at how long it took for Europe to collaborate and form a trading union. You know that you are in very early stages, but you have achieved more than in the first few years of the EU agenda. But we have to be realistic. There are problems and challenges, and it will take a great deal of determination, and it will take a great deal of relationship building and trust. But if Africa can do that, genuinely, we will see a revitalization, a renaissance of Africa.
How can Ghana weather the storm? I mean, looking at this economic challenge that we're facing.
Yeah, it is a challenging environment, but it's a challenging environment globally. If you look at the WTO statistics, global trade is going to slow down over the coming years. So the world is in a difficult place at the moment, and the global economy itself is in a challenging environment. If you need only look at what's happening in Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, and Italy currently to see that this is not just an Africa problem, this is an international problem. However, what Ghana has to do is to take a very determined sense that we will be innovative and we will seize opportunities.
Trade, as we know, it thrives on strong institutions. Unfortunately, in our part of the world, the West Africa sub-region, it's not been all that smooth, is it? Looking at what's happening on the Gulf and also the governance weakness that we're experiencing across the West Africa sub-region. Let's start off from your concerns, security concerns on the Gulf of Guinea, and the fact that there are increasing cases of piracy, as of course being reported. Is that of a worry to you, and could that cripple the entire sector that we have here?
It's a huge cause of concern. You know, anything that disrupts, anything that is illegal, that disrupts the flow of international trade is a bad thing. As I've said many times before, businesses which trade internationally, businesses which trade cross borders, are more sustainable, more resilient, employ more people, are more innovative, and are more profitable. So anything that disrupts that is bad. Bad for business, bad for communities, bad for nations. So we have to stop it. And unfortunately, with the problems that are happening in the Red Sea, where we're also seeing an upturn in piracy again off the coast of Somalia, is sending much more of the global shipping to come around up along the west coast, and that is obviously now creating a bigger target for pirates off the Gulf. They have to be stopped. That, you know, and so action will need to be taken to prevent that, because they're not just damaging global international trade, and they're not just, you know, maybe for a few £1 million thinking that they're going to make themselves better off. They are fundamentally undermining the potential of Africa.
And I guess there are implications for us in terms of our economy.
For every economy across Africa, where there is piracy, where there is corruption, where there is bad business practice, that is not something that should be tolerated. It is a huge counterweight that prevents growth, that limits potential.
The issue about governance and, you know, the increase in unconstitutional changes in government that we're experiencing in the West Africa side region, some might feel it's a remote factor, but it has a direct bearing on international trade. How can, you know, West Africa build, you know, stronger institutions to stand the test of time and to ensure that investments that come into this part of the world are indeed secure?
I think the very last thing that West Africa needs, or Africa needs, is someone from the UK coming over and telling you how to solve what are the particular issues that exist within Africa. I think everyone here knows what needs to be done. It's a case of getting on and doing it, because anything that acts as a constraint and prevents growth limits human endeavour, limits the potential for future wealth and prosperity, and to tackle, as I've said, those key issues that humanity faces, whether that's in the environment, health, education, or economic deprivation. So, you know, I will leave Africa to solve Africa's problems, but you'll know what needs to be done. It's a case of making sure that that gets done.
Okay, I thought that would have been the last one, but we can't go without talking about gender, which should be of concern to us. Ghana's economy, largely informal, and the people you find in that sector are women. But when you come to the international level, it's not entirely the same, looking at the demographics. How can we promote more women, you know, support more women to come to the fore and to be, you know, at the forefront of international trade?
It's a big problem, and it's not just a big problem here. Even in the UK, there's a disparity between access to international trade based on gender, and men get a better deal out of it. So we work hard with the WTO on something called the She Trades Initiative, which is specifically targeting female-led businesses, entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, to help them, because they excluded from trade finance. They're excluded from the global supply chain, from the logistics and transport sector.
And of course, be sure to watch a playback of that on all of our Joy News channels. But that's all we have for you here on Connect Africa with me, Blessed Ogan. For more news, log on to myjoyonline.com. More stories there for you. Thanks for your time.